Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Azrina Izni binti Abdul Aziz and my group member is Afroza, Kaniz. And I will be representing my group to present on chapter 4, Learning and Memory. In this presentation, there will be two mind maps. Which is the first mind map is about learning and the second mind map is about memory, and the last towards the last slide or presentation I will be answering two questions from my classmates. So let's start with the first mind map. Okay, so in this mind map, I'm going to explain first about learning. So how do we learn and what is learning? Learning is relatively permanent change in behavior which caused by experience, and the learner need not have the experience directly. However, we can also learn when we observe events that affect others. We learn even when we don't try, and also we recognize many brand names and also how many products, and also how many products which we don't personally use. So here we can see that learning process can be explained in different ways. One is behavioral learning theories, and the second one is cognitive learning theories. So first, let me describe about behavioral learning theories. So basically, in this behavioral learning theories, there are two components, which is classical conditioning and also instrumental conditioning. So for classical conditioning, it occurs when a stimulus that elicits a response is paired with another stimulus that initially does not elicit a response on its own. So over time, the second stimulus causes a similar response because we tend to associate it with the first stimulus. Like, for example, there was a Russian psychologist named Ivan Pavlov who conducted a research on digestion in animals. Like, first he demonstrated this phenomenon in dogs. So Pavlov induced this classical condition learning when he paired a neutral stimulus, which is a bell, with a stimulus known to cause a salivation response in dogs, where Pavlov had feed the dry meat powder into the dog's mouth. So the powder was an unconditioned stimulus. So because it was naturally the powder was an unconditioned stimulus because it was naturally capable of causing the response. So over time, when the bell, which is the neutral stimulus, was being present with the food, which is the unconditioned stimulus, continuously, the bell will become a conditioned stimulus. So it did not initially cause salivation, but the dogs had learned to associate the bell with the meat powder. So the dog would began to salivate at the sound of the bell only, even though the bell was not present with the meat powder. So also here we can see that there are another two options, the stimulus generalization and also stimulus discriminations. As for stimulus generalization, it refers to the tendency of stimuli similar to conditioned stimuli to evoke a similar conditioned responses. So here we can explain that this is an example of Pavlov, who noticed in subsequent studies that his dogs would sometimes salivate when they heard noises that only vaguely resemble a bell, such as keys jangling. So the dogs would thought that the sound that are similar to the bell, like keys jangling, so the dogs would salivate, even though that's not the actual sound of the bell. I mean, it's not like, for example, the dogs heard the sound of the keys jangling, so the dog would responded. The dog would salivate because the dog thought that that was the sound of a bell. Would yeah. And also, stimulus discrimination occurs when the unconditioned stimuli does not follow a stimulus similar to conditioned stimuli. So when this happen, like for example, in this stimulus discrimination is when the researcher did not present the bell with the dog food, so continuously. So over time, when this happens, the reactions weaken and it will soon disappear. So another type of behavioral learning theories is instrumental conditioning. In this instrumental conditioning, it occurs when we learn to perform behaviors that produce positive outcomes and avoid those that yield negative outcomes. So it basically means that this instrumental conditioning occurs when a learner receives a reward after he or she performs a desired behavior. So therefore, over time, consumers come to people who reward them and tend to choose the product that makes them feel good and satisfy their need. So in this instrumental conditioning, it occurs in one of three ways. The first, positive reinforcement; second, negative reinforcement; and also third is punishment. So in this environment where it provides positive reinforcement, this strengthens the response and we learn the appropriate behavior. Like for example, when a man gets compliments by his friend because of his after wearing this perfume, he would be more likely to keep buying the product because there's something rewarding to him. He likes the compliment that his friends given to him. So it is something that this example of positive reinforcement. So the second one is negative reinforcement, where it strengthens responses so that we learn the appropriate behavior. Like for example, when you can see, if you see that there is an advertisement where they showing the woman who uses this certain shampoo, like for example Sunsilk or Rejoice. When this woman using this shampoo, her hair will become soft or stronger. However, they also showing the advertisement that a girl who is not wearing that shampoo, her hair will become greasy and not pretty and so forth. So this is the negative reinforcement of not wearing a shampoo, for example. And also another is punishment. This is a situation where we learn to do certain things in order to avoid unpleasantness. Like for example, when the friends are ridicule us if we wear a nasty smelling fragrance. So and also, besides that, there is also a situation where a person no longer receive a positive outcome. So this extinction is likely to occur. And the learned stimulus response connection will not be maintained. Now, for example, the man would no longer receive a compliment on his perfume, for example. So thus, the positive and negative reinforcement strengthen the future linkage between a response and outcome because of the pleasant experience. So this tie is weakened under condition of both punishment and extinction because of the unpleasant experience. So this figure will help us to reinforce the relationship among these four conditions. So in the marketing application, in here we can understand that the like for classical conditioning, where by repetition, in which we could apply marketing in this classical conditioning where we need repetition in order or to ensure that the consumer is actually exposed to the message conveyed at least 3 times. And also by conditioned product association, where advertisement often would sometimes pair a product with a positive stimulus, like for example the humor, the music, and lots of others. And also there is also a stimulus generalizations. So as for instrumental conditioning, where we could apply marketing in the store and brand, where store and brand loyalty, where for example Sephora had been giving this loyalty card to their loyal customers, where they could get a reward after they had reached a certain points or certain points something. And also social marketing, and as well as employee performance. So in this employee performance, like for example the employee could get a reward from based on the ranking of their performance, for example. So now I will describe about cognitive learning theories. So unlike behavioral learning theories, cognitive learning theory approaches stress the importance of internal mental processes. So one of the most important things of cognitive learning is observational learning theory, where it occurs when we watch the actions of others and note the result they receive for their behaviors. It's like when we so this process can be attention, retention, production process, motivations, and go to observational learning. So in this attention process, where the consumer focuses on the model's behavior. So after they focus on the model's behavior, they would go to a stage of retention, where in this process, the consumer retain this behavior in their memory. Then after that, in the production process, the consumer has the ability to perform the behavior, and at last, in the motivation process, a situation arises wherein the behavior is useful to the consumer. So in this observational learning, the consumer acquires and performs the behavior earlier which demonstrated by the model. So in this marketing application, the marketer need to convince consumer to buy the product. Because of cognitive learning, marketers only need to influence the sources which influences the consumer. So consumer socialization is the process by which young people acquire skill, knowledge, and attitudes which are relevant to their functioning in the marketplace. So basically, they can be influenced by their parents. Like for example, me personally, I would be influenced whenever I want to buy a toothpaste. Because since I would first would try to find a Colgate brand, because since I was small, my parents would only use Colgate brand. So that's how my parents influenced me in buying the Colgate brand instead of other brand. So apart from that, TV and also web could also influence people as well, including the children. And as for cognitive development message, we could for this cognitive development message, usually the kids are likely to realize that something they see on TV is not real, like for example, and as a result they are more vulnerable to persuasive messages. Yeah, and so that's all for the learning part. So now I will explain on the second mind map, which is on memory. Okay, so the next part in this mind map, I'm going to explain about memory. Okay, memory is the process of acquiring information and storing it over time so that it will be available when we need it, and it also is the faculty of the brain by which data or information is encoded, stored, and retrieved when needed. So basically there are three forms of memory system. The first is sensory memory, which is it stores the information we receive from our senses, and it is temporary, which can only last for a few seconds. Like for example, when you pass through a boutique, you had a glimpse on this cute and pretty dress, and after you just walk away and you forget about it. So because it's only lasts for a few seconds, that's an example of sensory memory. So the next is short-term memory, in which it stores information for a limited period of time and it has a limited capacity. As for long-term memory, it allows us to retain information for a very long period of time. And in this long-term memory, marketers would assist in the process when they devise catchy slogans or they curate songs that would that cons- that consumers would repeat on their own. Like for example, most of us would sometimes unconsciously singing a song from an advertisement, right? So that's how marketer use this so that it would be retained in our long-term memory. Next is how our brain encodes information. So the way we encode or mentally program information helps to determine how our brains will store these informations. So more likely that we retain incoming data through associate it with other things that are already in memory. Like for example, we would associate Coca-Cola brand with a red and white color. So in this, for how we encode information is first is through sensory meaning, like such as the literal color or shape of a package. Like for example, we see an ad for a new snack food that we have recently tasted. And second is semantic meaning, where we associate with symbolic meaning, like for example, Ferrari car or Mercedes or BMW, we associate it with the rich people. And as for episodic memory, this is related to events that are personally relevant. Like for example, you and your best friend, you always listen to this one song, listen and sing to this one song whenever you spend time together. So during the time when you are alone and you listen to this song, you could simply bring back all those memory to the time that you've been spending time with your best friend. Yeah, for example, like that. So as for narrative, it is a description of a product that is written as a story, and it is often an effective way to convey product information. Like for example, this year Hari Raya ad, like for example Maxis, they use this kind of narrative or storytelling kind of advertisement where they show we celebrated Hari Raya with through video call. So usually marketer would grab these chances to portray this kind of celebration, Hari Raya celebration that we celebrated this year through video call. through video call. So the next one is how our memory store information. So according to activation models of memory, an incoming piece of information gets stored in an associative network that contains many bits of related information. So we have each have organized system of concepts that relate to brands, manufacturers, and stores stored in our memories. The contents, of course, depend on our own unique experiences. Like for example, in this branding activation, a marketing message may activate our memory of a brand directly. Like for example, when we see a logo of a Starbucks, even without the word Starbucks on it, we know that that is the logo of Starbucks because we know that is the logo of Starbucks. Or it may do so indirectly when it links to something else that related to the brand in our knowledge structure, like brand specific. For example, it is a memory which stored in terms of claims that the brand makes, like for example Trivago. Trivago claiming that whenever you want to find a hotel, you must remember Trivago. So that is one of the slogan, like Hotel Trivago. That is one of the slogan of Trivago. And for ad specific, like memory is stored in terms of the brand name, like for example Trivago, and also the product category, where memory is stored in terms of how the product works or where it should be used. Like for example, in the Trivago advertisement, where they're showing a woman using a phone to use the Trivago apps in order to book a comfortable hotel at the most cheaper price. Next is evaluation reactions, where memory is stored as the positive or negative emotions. Like for example, when you see a Trivago advertisement, you would say like, oh, I like how the woman explained the product, or how or I like how Trivago ads portray the message, for example, like that. So next is level of knowledge, where within the knowledge structure we code elements at different levels of abstraction and complexity, where it have a proposition links, like for example Trivago is an app to book a hotel at a more cheaper price. So this schema is a cognitive framework where we develop through experience. We encode information more readily when that information is consistent with an existing schema. Like one type of schema especially relevant to consumer behavior is a script. A script is a sequence of events and individual expects to occur. So as consumer, we learn service scripts. These service scripts that guide our behavior in commercial settings. So we expect a certain sequence of events, and we may become uncomfortable if we do not. If the service departs from our script. Like for example, when you want to shop online at Shopee, you would first, of course, would open up the Shopee apps. And second step, you would search for the product. And third, you would click buy the product. And also the next step, you will fill all those detailed information. And next step is to make payment. So that's how the service script is. The next is retrieving memories. So retrieval is the process whereby we recover information from long-term memory. So some evidence indicates that we can more easily retrieve information about a pioneering brand. Pioneering brand is the first brand to enter a market, like for example Coca-Cola or Microsoft. Then this more easily to retrieve information from about the pioneering brand than we can for the follower brands. So as for the spacing effect, it describes the tendency for us to recall printed material more effectively when the advertiser repeats the target item periodically rather than presenting it repeatedly in a short period of time. So the next is measuring memory for marketing theory. Marketers pay so much money to place their messages in front of consumers, so they hope that people will actually remember these ads later on. So this is one of the measuring used by marketers, like in recognition and recall. So how the ads make a good impression to us shows that the ads is a good advertising. So how can this impact be measured? It basically through recognition and recall. In the typical recognition test, researchers would show an ad to subjects one at a time and ask if they have seen them before. Meanwhile, for free recall tests, they would ask consumers to independently think of what they have seen without being prompted for this information. So recognition score are almost always better than recall scores, because recognition is a simpler process and the consumer would have more retrieval cues available to them. So both types of retrieval play important roles in purchase decision. However, recall tends to be more important in situations in which consumers do not have a product data at their disposal. So they must rely on memory to generate this information. And the second is memory lapses. These people are also prone to forget information or retain inaccurate memories, and even the younger people. So these typical problems include omitting, which meaning leaving the facts out, and also averaging, which is the tendency to normalize memories by not reporting extreme cases, and also telescoping, which is meaning you recall of an inaccurate information. So these distortions are not just a problem in court cases, which rely on eyewitness testimony. They will also call into question in the accuracy of a product usage, the databases that rely on consumers to recall their purchase and consumptions of food and household items, for example. So the next is the marketing power of nostalgia. Nostalgia can be described as the bittersweet emotion that arises when we view the past with both sadness and also longing. So the references to the good old days are increasingly very common, and as advertisers call up memories of youth and hope that this feeling will translate to what they selling today. So as per retro brand, it is an updated version of a brand from a prior historical period. This product would trigger nostalgia, and researchers find that they often inspire consumers to think back to an era or to time when life was more stable, life was more simple, at least to our memories. Like for example, in this, Pepsi also use nostalgia marketing strategy as a way to capture their audience and to strengthen their emotional connection. So as you can see here, they have been using the design from the year 1940s, the year 1950s, 60s, and also 80s. So this type of marketing strategy is also very popular among the marketers. So with this, that's all from me to explain about the chapter on learning and memory. So the next part is I will be answering questions from two questions from my class. So here for the first question is from Hossein Ismail, where his question is, in this 21st century, we can see that internet have been part of our growth, and even the children in their 2 to 3 years of age are very tech savvy. So how the marketers use internet to target children based on the cognitive learning principles? So here, internet is considered as a youth culture. So children nowadays, they are more tech savvy than the adults, as they will come to a phase or a stage where they learn and memorize very quickly, and they tend to get influenced more easily. Like for example, when children, especially the girls, they tend to be influenced by people that shows pretty makeup and showing tutorial on how to do makeup. So these children get to learn and imitate on how to do makeup by watching people on the internet. Due to this, they eventually would want to buy that makeup brand that the people on the internet were using, and because they had associated this makeup to be pretty. So this is where marketers make use of this to market their brand and to target the children. Like, like for example, we can see that there are makeup brand who collaborated with Barbie, Disney, or Hello Kitty, in which those are what the children are familiar with, because they have been watching those cartoons like Barbie or Disney princesses, so they are familiar with this character or cartoon. So by creating engaging, interacting environments based on products and brand names, companies can build brand loyalties from an early age. However, because the children have the abilities to process because the children differ in their abilities to process the product related information, advertisement, many companies now must obtain a parental consent if their brand is to target the children. So in order to avoid some this persuasive or intent of commercial that was being portrayed in the advertisement. Okay, the next question is from Shamin Tamana. Her question is, can sensory memory turn into short-term memory? So as I mentioned earlier, that sensory memory is temporary and it could only last for a few seconds. However, there are some certain circumstances or situation whereby, for example, like where I mentioned from earlier example, that the woman who passed by a boutique and had a glimpse on this cute and pretty dress, where she had decided to and allowed to retain this information for further processing, such as she had a glimpse on this cute and pretty dress, and she decided to further process this memory, where she thought of having to come back to the boutique and try to put the dress on herself, or even buying it. So this kind of situation, it will transfer to short-term memory. And then I think that's all from my presentation, and thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.